right, so what do you need to start throwing at your wheel? So I've got my stool down. Remember, I've got it pushed way up close to the wheel head. I like to keep the top of my stool about at the height of my wheel head, and there's a little lever underneath you can lift up or go down. How high you want it may have a lot to do with how tall you are. And so, you know, longer legs, longer torso, shorter arms, shorter legs, all of these things can influence where you want to be. So I usually start about this height, and then from there, if you're bigger or smaller, you can work on finding something that works for you. Remember, the pedal can go righty or lefty. The wheels can also go righty or lefty, but I need to give you a hand with that. So let me know. So the way we throw in the West, as in the United States and UK and stuff, we throw with our wheels spinning counterclockwise and our hands over here on the right. Left-handed and right-handed people can throw that way because you're using both hands. But some people feel more comfortable with the clay going the other way. Interestingly, in Japan and Korea, wheels spin clockwise, and so everybody, left or right, works over here on the left. So if you would like to switch the wheel direction, talk to me, I'll show you what to do. All right, so you are this quarter going to get a kit. This is what your kit is going to look like, plus you're going to get a chamois. Let me show you what is in the kit. My stuff looks sometimes a little bit different, just so you know. So I'm going to have my bucket that later I will fill with slurry, but right now it's where I store my tools. So these guys are trimming tools, big loop tool, little loop tool. These you don't need for throwing, you need for trimming. So if you're throwing today, you can set them aside. Another tool that you will need for trimming but not throwing is your maker's mark. So if you haven't made that, or if you have, you can set it aside. If you are, well, let me get to those later. That's for advanced. All right, stuff that comes in your kit. You're gonna have a cutoff wire. Yours will be wound up in a really annoying way, so you have to unwind it. Cutoff wire, just be careful that it doesn't, like if you bend it, it can like kind of make a sharp part. We don't want it to be sharp, so be aware of that. I sometimes hang it off the side of my wheel when I'm working. Can you see that? I hang it off the side of my wheel. Needle tool. Needle tool in your kit may come with a little plastic thing. Take the plastic thing off, stand up, walk over to the trash can, and throw it away. That little plastic thing ends up in the clay and it causes problems. Needle tool you will use for throwing. Wooden rib you will use for throwing. Metal rib you will use for throwing. You will have a sponge that looks nothing like this. Mine is just a dirty and a different type of sponge. So you're gonna have a sponge that looks like this guy. This is a more durable sponge. It's also smaller, a little bit more flexible. These are for sale at the bookstore or online. It's a Mud Tools sponge, so you're welcome to get one if you want. But they're like $8 as of this recording. You also have, a wooden knife. I can't remember if I said that. You'll have a wooden knife. The issue is the blade on there. You won't have a metal knife, that's fine. We don't need that on the wheel. I will also give you a chamois. Once they get used up, they look different, but you'll have a little piece of chamois leather that you can use for cleaning rims and stuff like that. So those are the tools that you will have in your kit. Sometimes people like to buy mud ribs. This is just a couple of different types of ribs. We have a few of these in the studio that you can borrow. I don't have 16. They are for sale at the bookstore, and again, they're like $8. This is just a stiffer type, a little bit different, replaces the wooden rib. And then you'll have a container. You can bring a container from home, but we've got a bunch in the studio. They're over by the door. If you know where I am in the studio, they're up by the door. You're gonna fill this most of the way up with slurry. This bucket here is perfectly fine size, except for mine has a crack in it and it leaks. But perfectly good size here. Don't do any smaller. If you do a little tiny yogurt container, it won't be enough. So this size or larger. So you're gonna fill that up with slurry. It's gonna go in the front part of your wheel, just in the splash pan. The tools, your choice. You can keep them on a board on your shelf, or you can have a bucket that goes in your wheel in your splash pan, and you can keep them in there. I also have one other kind of tool or one other kind of item, and these are bat pins. Bat pins are used if you're using a bat. You won't use a bat on the first day, probably. Those go in these bat pin holes. Mine are dirty, they have clay in them, and you can barely see them, but they go in bat pin holes. There's one on either side of this wheel head. All right, other things you should have on the first day to throw. You've got your tools, you've got your bucket of slurry. You're gonna have a board with some pieces of paper on it on your shelf, maybe more than one, depending how much you think you're gonna get done. And then the other thing I recommend but don't require is a towel on your lap. I forgot to grab them, but they're up by the front door. Put a towel on your lap. That way when your hands are gloopy, you can do this, and we'll wash the towel and not your pants. So those are the, oh, sorry. And then the other thing you'll need is some wedged up balls of clay. I've got a separate wedging video that you're gonna watch. Start with about a softball or grapefruit size amount of clay. You may find as you start to throw that folks with smaller hands are a little bit comfortable, a little bit smaller, but don't go a lot smaller than that. People with big hands, strong hands, may be a little bit comfortable with a bit larger, but don't double that, right? Just go up a little bit at a time. I would start on your first day with probably 3 to 5 balls of clay wedged up. You can leave them on a board on your cart. Don't put them in the splash pan. They will get wet and then you won't be able to use them. So those are the things you need. Directions for throwing show up in other videos. Thanks.